Shay Stewart-Bouley has ripped up her old script and is now, which wasn't really working for her, and she's now in the process of writing her new narrative. And what's so beautiful about Shay is that she's often ripping it up and rewriting it for all of us to see and learn from on her, in her Black Girl in Maine blog post. And her willingness to be a work in progress is both inspiring and intellectually stimulating, because Shay invites us to think more critically about the stories we tell ourselves. Please help me welcome to the stage to share more about her journey, Shay Stewart-Bouley.
Good evening. I don't think I'm going to have quite the energy level that Miss Jess over here had. What I am going to do, though, is I'm going to share how my decision to let it rip has saved my sanity and probably my life. Breathing in a paper bag. My first memories are of not feeling like I could say what I wanted. In my family, speaking up or out was not a valued trait. Looking back, tension was a huge part of my childhood. Over the years, I internalized all that tension and just stuffed it down. Sort of like when the garbage is overflowing and you really don't want to take it out. So you step on it, push it down, whatever it takes to keep stuffing it down so you don't have to take it out. At 18, I just wanted out. I ran off and got married, thinking marriage would free me from that tension. It didn't. I learned new tensions. 2 weeks after turning 19, I gave birth to my firstborn, my son. 4 months later, I had my first panic attack. I remember putting my son down, unable to catch my breath, chest feeling so tight, and just lying on the bed crying, certain that I was about to die, and that my son would grow up without me. An ambulance was called, and after hours in the ER doc informed me my heart was fine, that I was just having a panic attack. I was asked, was I under stress? 19 years old, in a questionable marriage, a newborn baby, few financial resources. No, I wasn't stressed at all. Within a year, I would separate from my first husband when our son was 13 months old. And for the first time in a long time, there was a temporary reprieve. The attacks that had almost become a daily occurrence, at times almost immobilizing me, would stop, but only for a little while. Funny that even when the attacks were a daily occurrence, very few knew, because I had learned early on that emotions and sharing them scared people. So I learned to perfect the smile, a look that never showed the depth of what I felt or what I desperately wanted to say. No matter how often I smiled, the truth was my inner garbage can was overflowing to the point I didn't even know what I felt. I just kept stuffing it down. The first hope for true relief came in my 20s when I switched to a younger female physician who wrote my first prescription for an antidepressant and gave me the advice that breathing into a paper bag would help with the anxiety attacks. After that, I was never without a paper bag or my pills that brought relief. Though a few years in, I found myself wondering, is this my life? Will I always be fleeing into a bathroom with a fucking bag to feel better? Learning to see. Life changed greatly by my mid to late 20s. I fell in love, remarried, still had to breathe into the bag, though by this point, I had started to slowly allow myself to express anger when mad. Being in a loving relationship where I felt safe gave me the strength to express myself. Once getting so mad, I took an aluminum Louisville Slugger to my metal bed when my poor husband made the mistake of needing to work late. Not the best way to let it rip, but for someone who had spent so many years holding it in, just that act felt courageous. During this time of testing and allowing myself to feel something other than anxiety thanks to my pills and bag, life was hitting me in a hard way. The first of many storms. I went back to school, which was a mountain I'd been scared to tackle, instead giving it 200% and getting my BA in 3 years. The decision to go back to school was the first major achievement I felt proud of. The act of finishing school let me start to think maybe I could change my life. It was at this point I was tired of the nonstop emotions and my inner garbage can either being stuffed down way too much or overflowing, so I decided to go to therapy. As a minority from a working class background, I was scared of therapy, but I knew I needed more than a Louisville Slugger, a brown paper bag, and an antidepressant. I needed to know why I was so anxious. My therapist turned out to be a lifesaver. I had a lot to unlearn. First thing I had to do was work on the individuation process. In other words, separating my identity from that of my family. Second, the issues I faced weren't me. I needed to stop taking in other people's shit and internalizing it. I needed to learn it was okay to speak up, that I was safe, I was loved, and that no one could hurt me unless I let them. I learned I needed to be intentional about my thoughts and feelings. I can choose to think a thought or not. I realized I had some choices and responsibilities, and that I can choose to take out my garbage or not, so to speak. It would be a full decade before I could finally live the process that we explored in therapy, but baby steps felt good. One of the first baby steps was a rather minor one in my family, but huge for me. I cut off all my hair, literally going from shoulder length to 1 inch. Culturally, hair is very loaded, with straight hair being seen as desirable, even though obtaining straight hair for me meant using caustic chemicals. When I cut my hair, I was done with hiding my natural hair, which is not straight. Wearing my naturally, tightly, curly, kinky hair was a sign of accepting myself. My husband didn't care for it, and my father hated it, going so far as to stop speaking to me for 2 weeks, and I was almost 30. It was okay. I didn't apologize, and I was fine because I was happy. I slowly put away the bat and took steps to speaking up. Mastering the blurting. No sooner than I made the decision to start speaking the truth, life happened and happened quickly. In a 3-year period of time, I would relocate 1,100 miles away, start graduate school, and have my whole entire support system die on me. Oh, and give birth to my second child. During this highly stressful time, I started to fall back into old habits. For a 2-year period of time, when it came to my family of origin, I went back to stuffing shit down as I navigated a tense relationship with my remaining parent. But there were glimmers of hope. After all, once you start emptying out the garbage can, you realize you can breathe without that stink. So I tested the waters at school. I was the only person of color at a very white school in New Hampshire where I went for grad school and often felt uncomfortable, and I didn't want to rock the boat. One day I snapped. Getting into a heated discussion with a professor, it was clear, did not care for me. But the day we got into it, I made my point, and he admitted, maybe I had a point. You damn Skippy. During this period, especially when pregnant with my daughter, I started to feel reborn as I carried her, and played even more with speaking up. It felt good, and once I knew I was carrying a girl, I felt more of a rush to speak up. For me as a woman carrying a girl, I felt I would be her mirror, and I never wanted her to feel the tensions that I had felt as a child. The act of speaking up, even in small matters for me, meant accepting that others may or may not like what I'm saying. Hell, they might even get mad at me, and that's okay. I'm only responsible for myself and my reality. During this period that I call mastering blurting, where I was still scared to speak out on the large issues, it did start to dawn on me that maybe, just maybe, the key to overcoming anxiety and subsequent depression did lie in speaking up. I always felt better when I spoke up. I started to mentally realize it's ultimately all about choice. The choice to honor others and not myself meant I often stuffed myself back into my mental and emotional garbage can, which for someone prone to anxiety attacks was basically a surefire way to increase those attacks. It started to dawn on me during those times that I had been groomed a people pleaser, as I think many girls are. We're predisposed, for someone who's predisposed to internalize crap, pleasing people means hurting myself. In the end of this phase of my life, it became clear that it was me or others, and that the only way out of this pit was to honor myself, my voice, and my truth. To learn to say no to others' demands and requests if they don't feel right for me. It was during this stage where I discovered yoga as well as the practice of meditation, both which helped me put down the bag, the pills, and the bats permanently. These are the tools, along with my authentic voice and being fearless in using it, that keep me going. Changing the narrative of my life. In deciding to find my authentic voice, I knew that that meant honoring it as well and being willing to take charge of my life and know that I can change the narrative of my life too. The things that for so many years I let define me are simply details. They aren't me. Instead, daily, I pray and meditate that I can be fearless, I can be joyful, I can have abundance, peace, and grace in my life. With that knowledge and insight earlier this year, I came headfirst with the reality that there were truths about myself that I had been stuffing down, where I had been letting myself be defined by the narrative of others. And frankly, if I wanted to honor my voice and myself, I had to confront those issues head on, even if I knew it could be painful, explosive, and possibly hurt someone else. The first issue was around my faith, and realizing the faith that I was raised with was not my faith, but I needed to meet God on my own. The next issue was my marriage, and the chance I took in speaking up to demand what I needed, knowing that what I needed could end our marriage. It didn't. It's been a rocky journey, but we're all the better for it. We still have awkward moments where I'm learning that sometimes honoring my voice requires finesse. But we also know that when I stuff it down, stuff that down, it often comes back out like a bad smell that threatens to overtake a small room. Honoring my voice, no matter how uncomfortable, is basic self-care. Many times we refer to retail therapy, a massage, or something outside of ourselves as self-care. But for me, self-care starts with listening to my inner voice and letting her guide me, no matter how dusty the room gets. Whenever I hold back, the result is a mental ache similar to the ache you get when you overeat. Professionally, I've allowed myself to take chances when honoring my voice, which have resulted in unexpected opportunities. Letting it rip. Since 2008, I've been blogging. My blog serves as a public space to speak my truth, and in many ways, to make sure I stay the course with speaking my truth. Initially, it was hard to speak honestly for any and everyone to see, but in choosing to be open and honest, transparency works best for me. I've been told that I am brave and honest, and that others wish that they could live the way that I do. But for me, the opposite of being open and honest and letting it rip at times is being withdrawn and back to breathing into that damn bag, caught in the midst of panic land. I cannot live like that ever again. Hell, I'm not going back to that place without a fight. I'm at the point in my life where I say it's better to ruffle feathers, cause a stir, and maybe even lose people I think are friends if I let it rip. It's painful, but I like the me I've become, a me that is direct, honest, intentional, and living my truth. And losing people and ruffling feathers is just a part of the journey to self and letting it rip. The upside, though, is that when the dust settles, is better connections, deeper connections that are not predicated on falsehoods of any kind, as there is no stuffing it down. There's inner peace from speaking up. And yes, one might ultimately say, isn't this all selfish? Hell, there's a lot of focus on self. But as I always say, it's if I'm not my best self, if I'm not happy. And if I'm not happy, how can I give to others? In the end, letting it rip is about living my life honestly, being intentional and being myself, and not holding back out of fear or concern for others. If I stay in my reality, others can choose whose reality they want to be in. Like I said, letting it rip, it's a good thing.